All right, thanks for joining me this week. This is my long form video of buying your second property. So I'm talking about you bought a property and you're done living in it, whether it's a phase of life, job change, location change, whatever the case may be, and you're considering, do I sell this one and leverage the proceeds, which would be your profits in the sale, into the next property with a 1031 exchange if it was a rental property, or if it's something that you're living in and moving out, you have the capital gains exemption benefit of $500,000 for a couple, $250,000 if you own it by yourself. Now, reason I'm making this video today is because I took a guy shopping. We got into escrow and he ended up ultimately changing his mind. And I'm not saying that any one reason is why he ended up canceling this one. It was a challenging location. It turned out during the inspections and the investigations that it was just like one thing on top of another, that was a little bit more expensive to own this place, a little bit more to maintain it, a little bit less accessible during the inclement weather and stuff that you wouldn't really expect in SoCal, but we found that to be the case up here on the top of that mountain. All right, so I wanted to kind of get through and jot down a bunch of things that him and I talked about throughout the process. And first of all, the elephant in the room is that right now, affordability of buying a property is pretty high. And I think it's probably as high as it's ever been when you factor in that the prices went up very severely and very quickly during the COVID shutdown era of 2020 and 2021. And the interest rates went down to 2.5%, 3%. Everybody was able to go spend more money on a property and have a lower payment. So now the prices are not plummeting. There's no crash. There's no indications that show a crash outside of unemployment. Mass unemployment would and could cause people to stop making their mortgage payments and have to move for work. And the thing about that is that they would probably just put their house for sale. Now, if a bunch of people at the same time found that that's the answer that they need to move forward with, then we would have more for sale than there are buyers. And what would the buyers end up looking for if there's 4 or 5 houses for sale in that same pocket of that same neighborhood that they're interested in? First of all, they would try for their favorite property of the 4 or 5. So let's call it 5. So we go to the favorite property and maybe the seller isn't willing to bend on price. So then we go to the second choice and that seller is willing to bend on price. So then he ends up selling at a lower price. Well, that leaves the other 4 saying, well, shoot, that guy sold for 50,000 less. Maybe we should reduce our prices by that 50,000. So then everybody reduces their price by the 50,000, and then the next buyer comes in and he goes after his favorite, and maybe he picks gets into his number 1 or number 2 choice. And again, that was a $25,000 even lower. And that's how the prices of real estate will decrease. Now, in those 5 original, those 2 guys sold and drove the prices down, said by $75,000. The next conversation that each of those 3 that remain are going to have with their real estate agents is, you see this one sold for this price, you see that one sold for that price, we're going to have to lower our price. And then the seller might say, you know what? Thank you for helping me try to get what I needed to move forward in life. But it makes more sense for me to stick around now that the price is $75,000 less than what we expected. And it's an expired, withdrawn, canceled, whatever, it goes that way. Unfortunately for that guy, his phone's going to blow up from all the other agents that will promise that, man, I could have sold it for that highest price, just hire me. When we all know that it's price and condition, right? So when it comes to the real estate agent, what are they going to end up doing? They're going to end up making sure that you're not jumping into escrow at the first person that's interested. They're going to leverage. They're going to speak to everybody that has seen the home and make sure that they're all a no, especially if we're going to move forward at a lower price. I would definitely do that as a listing agent, and not all listing agents do. Some just put it on the market, and the first offer that comes in, they try their best to make it work. And if that doesn't work, then they'll go to the second offer and they try to make that work. And they're not really talking to the group of people that are interested and leveraging all of the different numbers that they're talking about. So that's why you would hire me or someone like me, that's going to do my best to get the leveraged price to be up as high as possible. All right, so the interest rates are higher today, right? They're in the high fives if you have really good credit. They're in the low sixes if you have that mediocre credit, in the 600s. For the VA loan is what I'm kind of quoting here. If you're getting quoted higher than that, please do reach out to me so that I can connect you with the lenders that offer the best product, which is the best interest rate, at the best price, which is the lowest amount of out-of-pocket closing costs for you. So let's move on. Prices are up. They're staying up. A little bit of softening here and there, especially when the condition of the home is not up to par. The person next door sold for 800. They put their offer, or they put their house on for 800, but they keep getting offers for 750, 760 because the condition of the home isn't as well as it was on that $800,000 property. So there's that. And then the insurance costs, on the particular case that I'm making this video because of, the insurance was a little bit higher because it's out in the mountains and there wasn't any other neighborhoods really around. It did help that it had a water tank for firefighting capabilities. It doesn't help that same firefighting water tank valve was seized and would need replaced or maintained on that. And then you've got the HOA, which in this case there was no HOA, but I'm getting a lot of feedback from my buyers that are shopping nationwide that especially in high rises, condominium complexes, places where it's expensive for insurance, that they're finding that the HOA is quite high. And real quick, I'll just address a couple of things about HOA. Is that they take care and maintain the parking lot, the parking structures, the roof, the water bill, the power bill, or not the power bill, sorry, the water bill, the trash bill, the sewer bill. So most HOAs will take care of those things. If you're in a neighborhood of houses, like detached houses, and you have an HOA, then what they're going to be doing is they're going to be taking care and maintaining the private roads, the community pool, if there is one, the community park, if there is one, the basketball courts, if there is one. So, and tennis courts, pickleball courts, all of that stuff. There might be a golf course incorporated into the community. A lot of the golf course communities have HOAs to protect the integrity of the neighborhood so that when people come to visit their golf course, they can rest assured that everybody's lawns are manicured and everybody's houses are being maintained at an acceptable level and not put off anybody from not wanting to drive through that nasty part of town in order to get to this beautiful golf course. So I'm not a big hater of HOAs. I actually had a conversation just the other day, actually with this buyer, because the place that he's moving out of does have an HOA, and it's up there. It's like 500 and something per month. And I said, here's the thing, like your insurance cost is going to go down significantly because now all you're going to do is insure the walls in and none of your own personal goods. The renter is going to be doing that. So there's a win there. I don't know what the monthly amount was, but we did calculate it and address that. So now we got to talk about the monkey in the room, or the elephant in the room, really, is the tragedy of what he expected to be able to rent his place out for and what he found to be the truth about the market on rents. Right now, you're probably going to end up paying about 20 to 25% more per month if you make a purchase than you would to rent something. And the rents haven't gone up extremely fast the way that the prices have. So even though he had bought this property years ago, it was only a few years ago, and it wasn't long enough ago that he can now rent the property for enough that would net him the amount to pay the mortgage. And a lot of people stop there and they say, hey, this is BS. And, I did my best to get him to move forward and take a step off of that position. That position is one that he did hold one of his feet on for sure. The other foot was on the cost of the ownership of this next property. So then it was kind of like a marrying of the two things where, insurance is higher over here, maintenance is higher over here, and then I'm not going to be cash flowing over here. I'm actually going to be having to keep investing my own income into this property. And that kind of rolls me in to what my point is. If you own a condominium or a townhouse or a house that costs you $3,300 a month and you can rent it for $2,900 and you would actually only receive about $2650, you're looking at making an investment in that property that you're moving out of by $600 or $700 a month. Now, if you take that same $600 or $700 a month and put it into 8% index fund, that, and I know 8% is really high, but I'm trying to be favorable to you guys that will choose to invest your $700 a month instead. So instead of going $700 a month upside down in the house, if you would just take that $700 a month and put it into an index fund that pays off 8%, we found that the compounding interest and all of that would end up being $700 a month. I think it was like $670 a month for no, so it was $720 a month for 20 years with the 8% index, was going to end up yielding a balance 20 years down the road of $240,000. Now that same $240,000 is interesting because if he were to sell that property today, we could probably get like $500,000 for it. So if you just go to 4% increase every year for the next 20 years, which is about the average when you stretch out that ownership for 20 or 30 years, you go 1, 2, 3, 4. I got to do it on this calculator over here. I should have had this number ready, but I don't want to spitball it here. Anyway, the point is that you're looking at about $500,000 in equity, where your fund over here is 240. Now, what's really fair to mention is that as this $240,000 account grows, you can like borrow against it on margin loans, and you can also take it and put it down on properties in the future. But the fact of the matter is that when we did the calculation, and he did his own calculation as well, and we both found that it would be much better to invest that $700 a month for the next 20 years into this property than it would be to stick it away into an index fund. Now, what's interesting to me is that it was very difficult for me to communicate to him, to conceptualize that $700 a month loss is not going to stay a $700 a month loss, right? And why is that? Is because rents grow. What you could rent something for 20 years ago that's like this property is probably so much further down the road. It's probably like $1,000 a month instead of $2,900 a month, right? So in this scenario, I was letting him, trying to help him conceptualize and letting him know that you're going to increase rents by 5 to 8 to maybe even 10% some years. Here in California, we do have a limit. It's 5% plus the cost of living adjustment, which cost of living adjustment is usually between 2 and 5% per year. And the government does come out with that number. So your current tenant paying $2,900 today, if we go 2,900 times 1.06, call it, next year they're paying $3,075, right? So if you take that and go times 0.106, the following year is $3,258. Right. So we're almost to the point where the tenant is paying about as much as the landlord is paying. But remember that there's those 2 years and there is maintenance items because things do wear and tear. So to be fair, like I didn't have the golden egg, the answer for everything. And I don't think that that's my job. I think it's my job to help him to discover and explore all of his options there and make sure that we don't, fall into a scenario where he gets into where he's over leveraged, where he can't afford to make a payment. And that's just not cool, especially if maybe you get a problematic tenant or some vacancy that requires him to make both mortgages. That became a little bit daunting as well inside of this conversation that we had. So we got the yearly increases. There's also the refinance capabilities, especially on the one that you're buying. So like today you're buying a property at 5.75% interest rate. When the interest rate becomes 5.25 or lower, the VA does have the interest rate reduction refinance loan, where if you're going to be saving 0.5% on your mortgage rate or reducing your mortgage rate by 0.5% or more, they'll allow for you to do that at a lower cost. And the cost is almost zero. especially when you're a disabled veteran that qualifies for zero funding fee. So you can reduce your replacement home also, which would then just help you in that. So my point is that leaving this property that he no longer wants to live in for a property that he does want to live in, to me, like, that's enough that I would have made the decision to go, even if it would have been, $1,000 a month that I'm still investing in this last property. Because another thing that he really didn't conceptualize, and I tried to communicate it to him, is that, hey, you're going $700 a month. I get it, right? How much is coming off of your mortgage per month? And he literally said, I don't know. And that means that he's just never looked. And I want to encourage everybody, every month when you get your mortgage statement or statements, do look at how much is coming off your principal. Because if you're putting money into the property and it's less than what's coming off of the loan, then you're in a really good shape. You're in positive right there. Your equity is growing without any appreciation. Your equity is growing faster than what you're putting into it. You're getting an immediate return. And it's almost like when you're contributing to TSP or 401k that has a match where you have to put in 6%, and the business or the military will match you to 2.5% for your 6%. So like something like that is already built in if you know where to look for it. Okay, so the price of the next home, like, it was not an issue, obviously, when we put in the offer. It just became an issue when we got the insurance quotes and we started looking at how much it's going to cost to live there, especially when taking into account the winter expenses of maybe even having to get a hotel room for a week or so while the place is snowed in. So now here's the weird thing, is that it's very difficult for people to conceptualize. They think that, oh, well, the seller and the listing agent, they decided what price to put up. And really, if you look at it, everybody knows the word comparables, and nobody really conceptualizes and thinks about, like, where does that word come from and why is it important? First of all, it's very important to the appraisers and to the bank that you're not the goofy guy that's going to go and pay 40-50% more for a house, like a $400,000 house for $600,000. The bank doesn't want to participate in that risk with you. You might see the value at $600,000, but you're the only buyer. The next buyer down is $400,000, which means if you don't do what you're supposed to do with that mortgage and that property, and the bank has to take it back, their next buyer is $400,000. So they don't want to lend out $600,000. So first, let's just understand this, that where two buyers agree to buy a property, that house is definitely worth that much, right? There's always the anomaly, and there's always anecdotal people out there that'll pay a little bit more, and there's even more that would be like, oh, they're crazy, I would never pay $850,000 for that house. Most I would do is $600,000. And I say, well, where did you come up with the number $600,000? And it's always a blank, like, well, I just kind of made it up just to sound like a jerk, or to sound like I'm to get you off of showing me this property. And that's okay too. But there is, like, one right now I'm trying to negotiate. The sellers they have blank land. There's no house on it. And they want $800,000. And when I asked the listing agent, where did you and the seller come up with this $800,000? It was a whole lot of, like, belief and faith, and just it turned out to be like they made up a number that makes sense for the seller. That, well, if they'll give me $800,000, I'll take it. Well, when my buyers did their due diligence, we realized that they were pretty much around that 550 mark because of the cost of construction, and they wanted to later first build a house and then later build out the property for horses and barns and shop and all of that stuff. And we know that the horses, barns, and shops, like, they have their own economy, especially the horses part, because they're going to be boarding horses. And that's another thing that I'll make a point on later on, is like buying property that you can profit on, or you can leverage for an income outside of renting the house out, is a pretty cool move that not a lot of people think about. So buyers decide. So when a person puts a property on the market and nobody comes and sees it, that means the entire market has decided that they're asking too much. They don't even know the condition of the home, so they're not even really judging the condition of the home. And people think, like, oh, well, nice pictures will get somebody in here. And actually, no. First of all, the first filter that everybody does is price. What am I pre-approved for? What am I qualified for? Right. And this doesn't necessarily mean that the house is only worth what the buyer is pre-approved for. But when you have one buyer, which is the case for this piece of land, they have one buyer that wrote an offer and it was us. Like everybody else is just circling and probably waiting to see if the seller will take a lower price, but not willing to put their money where their mouth is and put it in writing like we did. And when we put it in writing, the seller, I got back from the listing agent that they were offended. And I'm like, you made up a number. We didn't make up a number. We calculated our number, and like your made up number versus our calculated number, you should not be offended, which even solidifies my opinion that they just made that number up. And not only did they make the number up, they made the number up and then they convinced themselves that the place is worth the number that they made up, which is totally wild. But back to the point, buyers decide how much houses are worth, not the appraiser, not the effing banks, and not the effing seller or the listing agent. The seller and the listing agent are trying to speculate how much buyers would be willing to pay. The whole time you're in a listing appointment, I'm in a listing appointment, I'm talking about buyers from the buyer's goggles, from the buyer's perspectives, from the buyer's opinions, because the sellers want to talk about their plans and their this and their that. Well, their plans and their this and their that, that defines motivation. And as a matter of fact, even if you're meeting with me, it's not in your best interest, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, to share with us what your plans are and how much you want to do those plans, right? We will take that motivation and assign a certain prescribed way forward with that, and it's going to affect our emotions as well. So only share emotional information with your professional representative that you want your professional representative to use as fuel or backdrop, right? So like back up, really, just if you want me to also acknowledge and move forward knowing that this is a emotional part of the contract or the transaction that you want me to be aware of and navigate through and with, that's fine. But I don't need you to unload on me. Like, you can go hire another professional to be your therapist or whatever, right? So buyers decide how much properties are worth. Now, how much is the property going to appreciate? You heard me earlier say that when we speculate the 4% increase over the course of the next 30 years, it's based on what happened in the last 30 years. And I'll tell you that there wasn't very many years in the last 30 years that it was a 4% increase. Some years were lower, some years were higher. The 4% just comes from the average of all of them together. So if you're going to own a property for, I would say, 7 or more years, you're probably in the really good spot where you're going to hit one of the good markets, because really that's where we get our appreciation from is in those hot markets. Obviously, the most recent hot market was the 2020 and 2021. And a lot of people ignore that it was a really slow rise from pretty much 2013 and on. But in 2008, when we had that crash, housing prices just went to like 50, sometimes less than 50% of what they were selling for previously. I know I bought a property that for 211,000, I think, or 217, let's call it 217, that my neighbors had paid over 400,000 when they were brand new first owners. So it did go down by 50% there, but now that same property is in the 500,000s range, right? Somewhere like 530 to 550. So like, over the course of time, it did correct. And I bought that property in 2011. So we're talking about the last 14 years, which is obviously much better of a hold than the last 7, because I caught 2 rises in that property ownership. Now, back to the point of like appreciation of a property only matters when you're going to borrow against this one in order to buy another one, or if you're going to sell this one and take the proceeds, whether it's a 1031 exchange or a primary residence to a primary residence purchase, and put that money down. Like, keep that money in play in your portfolio, right? So just roll that money forward into that. Now, borrowing against it, is what it is. It's kind of expensive to get a second mortgage. Like you're looking at 9, 10, 11% on your interest rates. So if you do something like that, you're probably going to want to prioritize paying off that higher interest loan before you would put any extra proceeds towards anything else. Now, do you expect the buyers to pay more in the future, right? So what I mean by this is this will make it more expensive for you to wait to buy, right? So if right now you're identifying a property that you're like, well, that price is pretty good, I wish the interest rates were lower, you can actually execute that, right? You can buy it now, and then when the interest rates come down, you already have your price, which is now your owed amount. It's reflected in your owed amount. So now you can just refinance. Like you have total control of this property. But what you can't do is make that property become available when you're ready, right? So that property is available today. Whoever buys it is probably going to own it for like 2, 5, 7, 10, 20, 40 years, right? You can't count on who's going to make their property available again. So this particular property, if you love a particular location or view or backyard or whatever, buy it, and refinance it at a lower interest rate when lower interest rates are available. Obviously, don't buy something that you can't afford, which is end up being the end of the case for the escrow that we just canceled, is that he just couldn't afford it. So when when you rent your current property out, right, for a loss, if you will, everybody wants to call it a loss. It's not a loss, but if you rent it out for a monthly investment still needed from you, you should also consider that when this guy moves out, it's not a $700 a month loss every single year for the future of all mankind, right? You're going to increase your rents by 5 to 10% per year. So let's say that you're losing $700 the first year, then you raise the rents, and now you're only losing $400, and you raise the rents again, and now you're only losing $100. And the very next year, you raise rents again, and now you're in the positive by $100 or $200 a month, and then you raise the rents again the following year, and now you're in the positive altogether, because even after the property manager takes his fee, you're now covering the tenant is covering their mortgage. Now, here's something that I want to purely address, and I think I'll make this a short. So, buying a $650,000 property that you're paying almost zero, we're talking about less than $3,000 out of pocket expense, was the deal he had here on the table. And on top of that, they were going to pay off $12,000 of his current debt, as in like his car, how much he owed on his car. They were going to pay $12,000 towards that. So now they were covering the closing costs, zero down. He needed $3,000 out of pocket for his down payment because of X, Y, and Z, and we can talk about that later in an independent situation, because you probably aren't in that situation. He has a very, very unique situation in the VA loan situation that he's in. So now he was going to have to come out of pocket $3,000 for the down payment. He came out of pocket probably $1,000 for the inspections that we had done. So a $4,000 out of pocket, $12,000 wiped off of your debt. So that's an $8,000 positive win. Why couldn't we get this thing to move forward is beyond me. The point that I want to make is that you have to bite the bullet and you have to take a loss. And it sucks right now to say, oh, well, I'm going to rent for negative and I'm going to pay more per month than I'm used to here. But just consider this. If you wait for interest rates to come down, you're making a huge mistake. When interest rates come down, you're not the only one waiting. And also, everybody making videos like this is not making them like me. They're saying, oh, interest rates are down, rent's lower than buying, you should rent. When interest rates come down, then you can have a better go of it, right? Now, when interest rates come down, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, maybe even over 1 million people are going to go shopping. Right? At what level? I don't know. If it goes down by 0.25%, a little level. If it goes down by 1.5%, a big level, right? No matter what the level is, that's more competition in the future for you, and it's going to drive the price up. Because what did I say how much a house is worth? It's worth exactly what two buyers decide it's worth. Because this buyer and this buyer both want it for $700,000. So now either one of them goes above $700,000, to win the property, or one of them takes the terms that the seller wants and the other buyer's not willing to. So you can only win with terms when you agree on price, right? So now you're going to be having to not get the $12,000 paid off of your car. You're going to have to not get only $3,000 out of pocket. You're going to have to pay your own closing costs. So now, instead of it being a $8,000 positive win to him, buying that same property in the future, even if there's no more buyers available, but without those terms, he's going to come out of pocket about $20,000. So you're talking about a $28,000 swing just by canceling this escrow, which was wild, right? And what doesn't make sense to me is that the people, even you, please question yourself, challenge yourself. Why would I wait for lower interest rates to lock in the price? When the lower interest rates come around, there's going to be more buyers. I'm going to have to fight for more. I'm going to have to fight against other people. I'm not going to get terms that are agreeable, and I'm going to have to pay a higher price. So now I'm a lose. But hey, I guess the lower interest rate is your win, right? And you lose in every other way. Now, let's talk about this. Just last weekend on the Browns, we had a defensive lineman that set a record, a career high, an NFL high for a single game amount of sacks. His team lost. That is exactly like waiting for interest rates to come down. You will be the Myles Garrett of your own life. Myles Garrett had a wonderful game, played his heart out, showed everybody what an athlete looks like, taught people on the field in the NFL how to play football. But he lost. And he said that he would trade his performance for a win any day. So this person or these people or you are sitting here trading the game for the interest rate. So stop it. And if you want to talk about it further, about your own unique situation, I'm here for you. All right. So now, final, right? People are willing to pay a third of their income on rent. People are willing to pay half of their income on a mortgage. There is that much benefit to ownership. So let's not even worry about all of the benefits to ownership because we all kind of know those, or I'll just make more videos about ownership benefits. Now, if we acknowledge, go back to the renters paying 1/3 of their income for rent. If you had 3 paid off properties and you were collecting 3 rents from 3 people, you would be afforded in a passive income situation to live the same quality of life as your tenants. So what does that mean? Take the amount of money today that you would like to make if you were to retire today. So for me, let's say that that's like $20,000 a month. So now I'm going to say, okay, so my house, if I put it for rent right now, would rent for $7,000 a month. Well, if I collect 3 of these, then I will be collecting $21,000 a month today. But now it's going to be priced in for the cost of living increases because rent goes up with cost of living and inflation. So as rent's going up, right, I've already identified where I want these 3 properties, what economy I want those 3 properties to be in. So maybe you like to own Section 8 housing, and you could say, well, Section 8 in this neighborhood rents for $2,000 a month. I want my retirement to be $20,000 a month. So I'm going to collect 10 of these and get them paid off. Cool. Because that $20,000 will be $40,000 a month later in the future when rents have doubled, right? And it's not one day after another. It's not like $20,000 today and $40,000 tomorrow. Obviously, it takes time. But you got to build your target. So my target is that I absolutely love the idea that I own this really nice luxury home in a luxury community where it's very calm and like chill community with a beautiful view, right? I would love to live in that house forever if I choose to. Now, if I don't choose to, I absolutely adore that it's $7,000 a month because I don't actually need $20,000 a month from real estate in order to retire. I think $7,000 is enough. However, I have other properties. I want other properties and on top of that. So we're going to get those other properties. We're going to get them paid off and then we're going to retire. So that's the beautiful thing, is that I got a luxury home, I've got a few condos, and I can retire with a luxury home and a few condos, right? Maybe I move out of the luxury home and go travel, do one of those world tours on a boat for 6 months or a year, however long it takes. And this is not common, but it's worth mentioning. Can the property be monetized? I promised that I would go back to this. So I'm talking about parking RVs, not people living in them, right? But parking RVs, boats, and trailers. Is there room for you to allow for your sphere of influence, your friends and coworkers, to park these luxury items on your property? Because they might live in a condo or in a tight community, to a community that doesn't have a whole lot of parking, right? Can you breed or train or board animals? Maybe even sitting animals, right? There's this app called Rover, and I saw a podcast where the lady was claiming to make $250,000 on Rover. I didn't listen to it all, so I don't know exactly what she did, but it's pretty interesting that she's making a very good living babysitting and taking care of other people's pets, which is super cool. Can the property be an Airbnb or hotel-like services? Is there camping, fishing, hunting that can be done on this property? Right, all of these things. I have a really good friend. Well, actually, it's my wife's really good friend that owns a hunting lodge in North Carolina. I don't know how much he paid for that, but I know that it provides him a very comfortable lifestyle where he gets to live on the property, he gets to hunt on the property, and other people pay him to join him in the hunting on that property. All right. Well, thanks for joining me. I know this is a long video. I'm going to get a lot of shorts out of this thing. If you stuck it through to the whole video, go ahead and subscribe. I don't have a whole lot of subscribers, but I'm trying my best to put out enough content to keep people engaged. And also make a comment on what you'd like for me to make a video on next. Thank you. Bye.